In the sweltering summer of 1888, the gaslit alleys of London's East End pulsed with desperation. Whitechapel was a labyrinth of poverty where the working poor clawed for survival amid overcrowded slums and gin-soaked despair. Fall. Prostitutes plied their trade in the shadows, horse slaughterers hacked away by the day, and the air reeked of sewage and unfulfilled dreams. But on the last days of August and the first weeks of September, a phantom emerged from the fog. A killer who will etch terror into the very pages of history. And his name was Jack the Ripper. Today we dive into the Ripper's savage opening acts, the Buckrose Butchery, where Mary Ann Nicholas met her gruesome end, and the Hanbury horror, the mutilated murder of Annie Chapman. These weren't just killings, they were the Ripper's manifesto, signaling a killer who butchered with surgical precision and vanished like smoke. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button and ring that bell. We're unraveling the Whitechapel nightmare, one blood-soaked street at a time. Let's step into the darkness. Our story begins with a woman who embodied the tragedy of the East End, Mary Ann Polly Nicholas. Born on August the 26th, 1845, in the heart of London to a locksmith father and a laundress mother, Polly's life started with modest promise. At 18, she married William Nicholas, a printer's machinist in a Fleet Street church, and they dreamed of a family. 5 children followed, but alcoholism and financial ruin shattered it all. By 1880, they were separated and penniless. Polly drifted into the underbelly of Whitechapel, charwoman by day, occupational prostitute by night to fund her gin habit. She bounced between workhouses and dose houses, her once dark hair graying, her 5'2" frame worn thin. Friends called her quiet, unassuming, a ghost in the machine of misery. Little did she know, on the night of August 30th, she'd become the Ripper's very first canvas. It was around 11 p.m. when Polly was spotted weaving along Whitechapel Road, her black velvet bonnet askew. She ducked into the Frying Pan pub on Brick Lane for a drink, emerging at 12:30 a.m. By 1:20 a.m. She staggered back to her lodging at 56 Flower and Dean Street, but the deputy turned her away. She was 4 pence short for her bed. I'll soon get the money. See my bonnet? She slurred, tapping the accessory like a talisman before vanishing into the night to solicit clients. Her last confirmed sighting came at 2:30 a.m. when lodging mate Emily Nellie Holland found her slumped drunk against a grocer's wall on Osborne Street. "Come back to the Doss house, Polly," Nellie urged. "I've lost my lodging money 3 times today," Polly replied with a bitter laugh, heading toward Whitechapel Road. That was it, the final thread of her life, severed in the pre-dawn gloom. At 3:40 a.m., Charles Cross, a 38-year-old cart driver heading to work, spotted what he thought was a discarded tarpaulin in the gateway of a stable on Bucks Row, a narrow, unlit thoroughfare lined with terraced houses and warehouses. Today, it's Durward Street, a quiet reminder of horror. Kneeling, he realized it was a woman, Polly Nichols, flat on her back, eyes wide open, skirt hiked above her knees, left hand brushing the gate. Her face was warm to the touch, but her hands icy cold. Panicked, Cross flagged down fellow Carmen Robert Paul. Together, they tugged her skirt down modestly and hurried to find a constable. P.C. Jonas Mizzen met them at Hanbury Street's corner. "She's dead or drunk," Cross stammered, but they knew better. Before Mizzen arrived at the scene, P.C. John Neal's lantern pierced the dark, revealing the carnage. Polly's throat slashed twice, once 8 inches deep, once 4, severing her carotid arteries and nicking the bone. Her abdomen was a butcher's riddle, jagged cuts, spilling intestines, stabs to the groin, all inflicted with a 6 to 8 inch blade in frenzied downward strokes. Dr. Henry Llewellyn arrived at 4 a.m., declaring her dead about 30 minutes prior, killed violently, mouth likely clamped to stifle screams, her life snuffed in under 5 minutes. Only a half pint of blood pooled beneath her. The Ripper had struck post-mortem on the guts, suggesting cold calculation. The inquest, led by Coroner Win Baxter, unfolded over days in September, painting a portrait of chaos. Witnesses poured in, Cross and Paul the discoverers, Emily Holland tearfully recounting the goodbye. Even horse slaughterers from a nearby yard cleared after alibis. No screams heard, no blood trails, just a busy escape route to Whitechapel Road. The jury's verdict: willful murder by persons unknown. Rumors swirled of leather apron, a shadowy Jewish shoemaker. But John Pizer walked free with ironclad alibis. The press ignited. The Star decried police incompetence, whispering of a lone wolf amid the slums. Polly's funeral was a pauper's affair, but her death cracked open Whitechapel's wounds, exposing the rot beneath. Just 8 days later, the Ripper escalated. Enter Annie Chapman, Dark Annie to her mates, a woman whose life mirrored Polly's in sorrow but burned brighter with quiet defiance. Born Eliza Ann Smith on September 25, 1840, in upscale Paddington to a lifeguard soldier and his wife, Annie grew up sociable and sharp-witted, her 5-foot frame crowned by wavy dark hair and piercing blue eyes. Married at 28 to coachmaker John Chapman, she bore 3 children, but tragedy struck. Daughter Emily died of meningitis in 1882. Son John was born disabled, and her husband's brewery job fueled her rum addiction. By 1886, separated and widowed after John's alcohol-fueled death, Annie washed up in Whitechapel's doss houses, hawking flowers and crochet work between tricks. Tuberculosis gnawed at her lungs. She had months left at best. Yet she clung to dignity, sober in her final days, lodging at 35 Dorset Street under the alias Annie Civvy. September 7 started rough. A dust-up with lodger Eliza Cooper at the Britannia pub over a borrowed soap bar, or a man left Annie with a black eye and bruised chest. The next morning, she shuffled to Whitechapel Infirmary, pale and wheezing, discharged too ill to work. By midnight on the 8th, she nursed a beer with Tinman Frederick Stevens at the lodging house, popping pills from a broken box for her lungs, opium-laced, wrapped in a torn envelope. "Brummy, keep the bed. I'll not be long," she promised Deputy Timothy Donovan at 1:35 a.m. Flashing 5 pence from her sister and heading to Spitalfields Market, John Evans glimpsed her vanishing into the night at 5:30 a.m. Neighbor Elizabeth Long saw her alive outside 29 Hanbury Street, a creaking tenement of 17 rooms housing 8 families, its backyard a communal privy for vice and violence. Annie haggled with a shabby genteel man, foreign-looking, over 40, dark-haired, in a brown felt hat and overcoat. "Will you?" He rasped. "Yes," she replied, sealing her doom as they slipped through the unlocked back door. Before 6 a.m., resident John Davis peered into the yard and recoiled. Annie sprawled near the fence, head inches from the steps, skirts up, hands bloodied as if she'd clutched her throat. Her throat was gashed savagely left to right, nearly decapitating her. Intestines draped over her shoulder like a grotesque shawl, uterus and bladder excised with precision. Flesh from her abdomen lay beside her, the work of a 6 to 8-inch blade wielded by someone with anatomical savvy, perhaps a butcher or surgeon. Dr. George Bagster Phillips arrived at 6:30 a.m., estimating death between 4:30 and 5:30 a.m. No struggle, no alcohol on her breath, just quiet asphyxiation before the blade danced. Blood smeared the fence, but no trail. The Ripper struck and packed his trophies in the yard shadows. The inquest dragged from September 10th to the 19th, Baxter presiding again. Amelia Palmer testified to Annie's faded respectability. Neighbor Albert Kadosh recalled a faint no. And thud at 5:45 a.m., a leather apron in a water basin sparked the leather apron frenzy. John Pizer arrested, but alibis freed him. Pawnbrokers scoured for her missing brass rings. The envelope's crest led to Edward Stanley, a militiaman cleared by duty logs. And suspects like Swiss butcher Jacob Eisenschmidt and German Charles Ludwig, all shadows, no substance. Verdict, murder unknown. The press exploded. The Star screamed of a high-class fiend, birthing the Ripper myth as panic gripped the slums. Polly and Annie weren't isolated screams. They were the Ripper's overture. Bucks Row exposed a killer bold enough for semi-public slaughter. Hanbury's yard proved his growing audacity, organs harvested like trophies. Media frenzy vilified the police, stoked anti-Semitic fires with Leather Apron, and spotlighted East End squalor, over 1,200 prostitutes in Whitechapel alone per reports. 3 more canonical victims followed, but these 2 ignited the inferno. Over a century later, the Ripper's blade still haunts, 135 years unsolved, with suspects from princes to painters. The Bucks Row Butchery and Hanbury horror remind us, evil thrives in silence. Polly and Annie were mothers, dreamers, victims of a system that chewed them up. Jack, he remains the East End's eternal specter. What do you think? Who was he? Drop your theories in the comments. If this chilled you, like, share, and subscribe for more Ripper deep dives next week, the double event for the coming seasons. Stay curious, stay safe, and remember, in Whitechapel's fog, the shadows still whisper.